Let's talk about what campaign box is the best one in Marvel Champions. Now we're going to be factoring in a couple of different variables here. We're going to think about the campaign mechanics, the villains, heroes, and also the player cards that come in the box. We're going to talk about each one of these parts individually for each box, but they're all going to all blend together into the overall ranking. And if there are any notable things in each one of the boxes, I'm going to make sure to call that out. Let me just tell you what I mean. We're going to start in 7th place. We have 7 of these, which is also really cool. But the bottom of the list in my ranking is going to be Galaxy's Most Wanted. It's going to be at the bottom mainly because the villains that come in the box are brutal. Collector 1, Nebula, and Ronan, I just find unfun and to a point unfair, especially when we're looking at it in a true solo lens. Drang is pretty fun. I like the way he interacts with the Milano mechanics and you get that resource generator. He's a nice entry into the box. And over the last couple months, I've been enjoying Collector 2 more and more. It's kind of a different way to play the game. But overall, the villains just don't do it. The saving grace here is the campaign mechanics when we're talking about like the villain side of the box to the bad guy side of the box. This is a really cool mechanism where you get to spend victory points you accrue through your games to upgrade cards. It feels very much like an Arkham kind of system where you're spending your victory points to buy cards that cost a certain amount of points. And I would love to see them do more of this. I very much like this type of system in the campaign. I'm just a little sad that it came with Galaxy's Most Wanted. But yeah, I would like to see more of that. Now, I do love the heroes in the box, even though they're not the strongest. Rocket is all about tech and being able to tinker your tech once they're done into more cards and like just big guns. Rocket likes guns and it's just a really fun playstyle, and Groot has some really cool growth counters that prevent damage and are used to power up some of his events. And I very much enjoy these heroes. They do fall towards the lower end of the power level chart, which also does not complement the higher end of the difficulties of villains that come in that box, and so it can be a pretty brutal box, especially if it's one of the first that you're stepping into. But yeah, there are some pretty good player cards in here. Most notably, like Hard to Ignore is a staple in a lot of these perfect defense builds where you don't take any damage. You get to remove threat from the main scheme, which kind of shores up one of the biggest weaknesses that archetype has. Def Focus is awesome. Reduce the cost to play a superpower. I should have looked up how many superpowers we have in this game at this point, but there are some cards like Quicksilver or Groot that just don't not run Def Focus. It's such a great resource generator for them. Hand Cannon's really good. You get that in the Rocket Precon. You get to get some Overkill, which can be really nice for some of our other heroes as well. While those cards are really cool, if you are looking to expand your collection, you're newer to the game, this would be the last box I would look into trying to find, or maybe try and find it on sale somewhere. But yeah, it's at the bottom of my list, and that one isn't really even in contention. It's pretty much solidified at the bottom of the list. And I am going to go through this list at more of a higher level detail than normal. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I will be sure to answer those either with a comment or with the YouTube Shorts reply, and we can just continue the conversation there. In 6th place, I have Mad Titan Shadow. I think the heroes in this box are the category that kind of brings it down the most. And while I know there are some people out there who love Adam and the creative deck building that he brings to the table, he doesn't super click for me. Spectrum I've grown to enjoy a little bit more over the last year or so, but still not in the top half of heroes I look to grab off the shelf. That downside is amplified by what I consider to be a less than exciting aspect card mix in the box. Sure, we get some cool like Mystic stuff, we get Summoning Spell and Magic Attack, which are great cards, but the heroes that can use these are limited. There's only so many Mystics in the game, and so they're good cards, but they're not going to be cards that you're looking to use a lot. I think the best part of this box is some of the leadership allies that come in Spectrum's Precon. We get White Tiger, who is awesome for card draws. Kalu fits in so many decks, especially those revolving around triggering different types of events. And while I know it isn't the strongest card, I really enjoy building a deck around Band Together. Using your army of allies to pay for things is just good fun in my book. But on the flip side, the box has some pretty awesome villains in it. Hela has been a longtime favorite of mine in the entire game. Ebony Maw, like puts these spells out, and every time he activates, they tick down until like if you're gonna run out of those 4 counters on Fireball, you best be ready to take some damage. And so that's just a really fun mechanism. I find myself going back to Ebony Maw a lot. Tower Defense is a fun take on the multi-villain encounter. And if we just don't talk about Thanos and Loki, we have some really fun villains that come in the Mad Titan Shadow campaign. The campaign mechanic in this box, I had to look it up. I totally forgot what it was, and it isn't that crazy. It is fun to get some shawarma and some fun Asgard allies. The campaign leaves a bit to be desired, but I don't put a lot of stake into the campaign mechanics when I'm evaluating boxes because I really don't play them that much. In 5th place, we have Red Skull. Or Rise of Red Skull, I should say. And I do want to caveat this ranking with, if you are brand new to Marvel Champions, I think that this is the best box to start with after the core. Get the core. The additional rules that it introduces, the additional concepts that it introduces are very minimal, and the card pool expands the core set very nicely with what comes in the box. You get cards like Team Training, Skilled Investigator, and Clear the Area. Those make it into a ton of my decks, and they come in this box. So if you are looking to start in Marvel Champions, this is where I would recommend. I would go to Rise of Red Skull. You do get Hawkeye, who is more fun than he is powerful, and Spider-Woman, who is probably my favorite multi-aspect hero in the entire game. And when I say that gets a little bit hard as well. I think she is my favorite multi-aspect hero to deck build for because she has pretty limited restrictions when it does come to deck building. So honestly, I think this box is worth it just for the heroes and the player cards, but I do think the villains are the more exciting part of Rise of Red Skull. Every single one of these villains I fight pretty frequently. You get deck testers like Crossbones and Taskmaster, and some really crazy deck stressors like Zola for an abundance of minions, and Red Skull for way too much threat to see if your deck build can handle it. And then you get an awesome punching bag that is Absorbing Man. Really, while these are not my favorite villains, it competes with my favorite villain grouping in a box, if that makes sense. Like if you take the average amount that I like all the villains, this is up there. I love the Rise of Red Skull villains. I think that they're not super flashy, but they complement and they add just so much value to that core box. The campaign is super mild. You get some fun upgrades that's going to like up your stats and stuff, but the campaign is almost non-existent in terms of rules that are added, which is how I would like that first expansion box to be anyways. And I think Red Skull is a great box, which is exciting because there are 4 boxes that outshine it on this list. In 4th place, we have the Age of Apocalypse. This is the newest box since the recording of this video. All around, it's very solid. Let's get the negative out of the way first. I do not like the campaign mechanics. And again, that does not sway me too much because I very rarely actually play the campaigns more than 1 or 2 times, but the mission side schemes where you're sending your allies away just didn't really do it for me. But that's kind of where the sadness subsides. The villains in this box are super interesting and are going to force you to be clever in your play. Unis is going to really make you think on your feet because you can't really rely on that chump block too much to protect you because threat's just going to pile up on Gene Pool. We have a form-changing villain with Apocalypse 2 who's going to be flipping to different forms, trying to smack you down in the process. Dark Beast changes based on the environment you're fighting him in, and not to mention those environments make awesome modifications to other scenarios when you put them in as mod sets. 4 Horsemen is a interesting and mean multi-villain scenario, but my favorite in the box is Apocalypse 1, and this is basically a blend of Magneto, which we'll talk about here in a second, and Hela, where players have to progress through like this side scheme deck to force Apocalypse into a vulnerable position so that you can actually be able to take him out, and those side schemes are going to be guarded by these giant prelate minions, and you have to have an answer for whenever you flip in. It's good. It's solid. The villains are the main attraction for me with this box, but Bishop and Magik are very unique and decent brain burners. These are the heroes. Magik plays with the top card of her deck face up. Bishop's all about having so many resources in your hand, and we get some really fun player cards as well, like the entire Sidekick archetype. Awesome X-Men allies like Goldball and Triage. It's a really awesome box, and now I'm excited to move on to the podium placements. Side note, I have been binging the Formula 1 series on Netflix, and I am addicted. So now I think of it as these are the podiums. But anyways, in third place, we have Sinister Motives. Sinister Motives has my favorite campaign mechanism. You grow on this like reputation track, which gives you more access to like shield toys. But the more well known you are, the more the villains are going to notice you and they're going to get stronger. They're going to put more resources in trying to defeat you. It's just so elegant and easy. There's deck building modifications, which always just makes me super happy. And there is a little bit of bias here because I love Web Warriors. So when we get Miles and Gwen in a box, I'm going to love those heroes a ton. And it's just icing on the cake that they're pretty fun mechanically as well. Miles is all about having just a absurdly low cost curve and inflicts a ton of status conditions, which is why he's one of the strongest heroes in the game. And Gwen is the master of protection and deals with a ton of interrupts and responses. The box comes to us full of Web Warrior friends and has some very playable precons right out of the box. And kind of a side note, this is tied closely with Shield, so I think it's going to be a really nice precursor to the next box we're getting soon, the Shield expansion. And so like I'm thinking that we're going to get some more toys that complement the ones that we got in this box. The villain side of this box, there are a couple of standouts. Venom Goblins is the closest thing that I have played to a fair Ronin. He is so challenging, but he is not unfun, I would say. I think Venom Goblin is one of the hardest villains in the game that is not as swingy as some of the other ones. That being said, he is very, very challenging. And every other scenario is just brilliantly designed. My favorite's probably going to be Venom, who gets a boost card every single time you attack him. And then like he's going to attack you for like... I've been attacked by Venom for like 7 boost cards. And that, especially when you have cards in there that give them overkill, can be very scary. And like we have a really cool multi-villain scenario in Sinister 6 where they keep like popping in and out of play and you're trying to get out and they're trying to just contain you. All around, it's just a fantastic, fantastic box. In second place, we have Mutant Genesis. The villains in this box are so solid. Magneto is probably my favorite capstone villain, meaning that last villain in the box that's able to stress a deck build in multiple different ways. There's so much going on with Magneto. Every single time you fight him, it is going to be a marathon, and you have to have a good deck in order to take him out, and you have to be good in your plays. And Mansion Attack, on to a lesser extent, is also great if you want to pull out to kind of test those decks to see how they're going to go up against different types of villains, because you're going to be fighting multiple different villains that all interact with the game differently in Mansion Attack. The other villains are great as well. Project Wide Awake feels like an upgraded Taskmaster. There's nothing quite as fun as like mind controlling Master Mold Sentinel Mark 8. Although, if you don't have the ability to mind control, Sentinel Mark 8's kind of suck. The campaign mechanic in this box is almost as fun as Sinister Motives, in my opinion, because you're going to be able to pick a role at the start of the campaign, which will dictate some of the ways that you can break the deck building rules, and it also comes along with some different upgrades that are going to lean into how you want to play the game. So, for example, if you choose the Defender route, you're going to be able to choose an event and or upgrade from the Justice or Protection aspect, even if you do not choose that as your deck build. So if you're running a leadership deck and you wanted to build a Defender, you could choose some Justice and Protection cards and add it to your deck. And it gets really fun to create some deck builds and combos that you normally would not be able to try, as long as you're, I guess normally not be able to try as long as you're playing within the rules. But that does create some really interesting and fun puzzles to figure out. I do really love the heroes that come in this box too. You get Colossus, who's an all-around tank with his ability to hold 2 tough status cards. And Shadowcat is such a fun puzzle to try and stay in intangible form where she does not take any damage whenever she defends. Both are awesome heroes that come with really great precons that really jumpstart the X-Men collection. So if you're looking to try and get into X-Men, this is probably where I would recommend you would start. And it's probably, honestly, the best box that starts an archetype. We'll see how that holds up once we get the new Shield box and the Sinister Motives. But if you're looking to kind of like, where do I start? I would still probably start with Red Skull to expand that core set. But if you are looking to like, I really want to have a cohesive kind of playstyle and archetypes, there's a lot of X-Men toys in this box that are going to add and lay just a great foundation. You get like X-Jet, X-Mansion, you get a lot of really good allies, and now you probably will want to pick up some of the hero packs in this wave to get the full potential of X-Men in the game, but it's a great start. I love this box, but it doesn't quite eclipse the number one box. I actually had Next Evolution, which is my number one box, in second place, and Mutant Genesis in first, and right before I started filming, I actually swapped them, and so that just kind of shows how close they can be. But Next Evolution, I just love the heroes in this box. If you evaluate nothing else, the heroes in this box are so good that it makes it a contender for one of these top spots. Domino is one of my top 3 favorite heroes. She has an ability to discard cards off the top of her deck for benefits and counts the number of resource icons on those cards. And wilds get double, and so you get like really cool interactions with how you're going to be doing that, and her being able to manipulate probability, and the way that they translated that into game mechanics I think was incredibly good. And Cable is one of, if not the best, support heroes in the entire game, with his ability to bring players' side schemes to the table. And that's another reason why this box is so high. We get introduced to player side schemes in Next Evolution, which are cards you put into play as schemes, side schemes, and when you defeat them, you get a special bonus. So this box comes with all the greats like superpower training, build support, call for backup, and so many more. And you also get access to Digging Deep, which is one of my favorite old hero new trick kind of series that I've done, because it just opened up so many different and unique and fun deck builds for older heroes in the game. And the greatness does not stop with player cards. It couldn't have, right? I don't think it would be in the top spot if it did. The villains are amazing. You have Morlock Siege and On the Run, which use a modular set, kind of. It's not really a modular set, for the villains. So every single time you play, you can be facing off against a totally new lineup because you're randomizing what villains come into play. And Juggernaut is always going to be a good time when you need to just see if you can handle some intense overkill. But probably my favorite part of the villain side of this box are the Mr. Sinister modular sets. You get Strength, Telepathy, and Flight, which can go in any villain deck. And honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of Mr. Sinister, and that's more of a personal, true solo bias. Whenever you scale him up to 2 to 3 to 4 players, he gets way better. I just don't love playing him in true solo, just because of how swingy he can be. But the modular sets are amazing. They give you ways to modify older villains with their setup cards. You have cards like Flight that are going to modify the stats as well as give overkill. And it's just such a great way to up the difficulty in any villain without just saying, I'm going to deal more encounter cards or something like that. The campaign mechanics are these player side schemes that when they're defeated, you can get some pretty cool benefits that carry over to the next scenario. All in all, it's just such a fantastic box, although it is a little bit on the more complex side, especially with some of the heroes in the box. So if you're newer to the game, I would still look at grabbing Red Skull first, but this one is awesome. Let me know what you think is the best box in this game and why. Tell me why down in the comments. I'm curious because this is all opinion based, right? I think that other than Galaxy's Most Wanted, I think, okay, no, I'm not going to say that. I think any of the boxes, you could make a valid argument for why it is your favorite box. Hopefully you all had fun watching. I'm excited to see what you all come up with down in the comments, and we'll see you around next time. Peace.